Today's episode is called Real Estate Flipping. Do you have what it takes? We will be discussing things you should consider, the pitfalls, and what are some options if a flip fails.
Educate your money now.
Hello, and welcome to Educating Your Money podcast. I'm your host, kirui-case, owner of Matnick Bookkeeping Services. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy. Today's episode is called Real Estate Flipping. Do you have what it takes? We will be discussing things you should consider, the pitfalls, and what are some options if a flip fails. We would like to thank Out and About Business Solutions for sponsoring our podcast. Today's guest is Clement Ziroli, Jr. Clem is the president and CEO of Diamond Creek Holdings. For over 25 years, Clem was employed by First Mortgage Corporation, having most recently served as its president. During his tenure, the company experienced tremendous growth. FMC and Clem's commitment to underserved borrowers earned Clem and the company a congressional citation and the Finance Champion of the Year award bestowed by the Department of Commerce. In addition to Clem's role with FMC, he managed a number of other companies focused on real estate acquisition, management, and construction. Through his companies and affiliates, Clem has participated in thousands of real estate flip transactions, amassed a substantial portfolio of commercial, industrial, and residential properties. He has also developed a multitude of other projects. Clem also co-founded NutriShop, a national chain of sport nutrition superstores. Hi, Clem, and thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so being the real estate mogul that you are, real estate flipping is always a topic that I think many individuals and business owners have thought about as a way to help mass their wealth, as a wealth building tool. But it is also one of those industries, I think, that you really need to understand the ins and outs of the industry, whether it be from someone like you, mentoring, or someone you know in the industry, but also having a clear plan to what you are doing in order for it to be successful. So, Clem, being successful in the mortgage industry as well as the real estate industry, what are three important things someone who is looking to get into real estate flipping should consider?
Well, I was kind of fortunate because I had the background in the mortgage industry, and so I was used to doing a lot of home loans. And so I started regionally. And what we did is, through the loans, all the properties that we would do loans on got appraisals. So I really started to understand valuation very well. It's one of the most integral parts of the flipping process, is really being honest with what the true value of the property on the resale is. So that would give you, obviously, the entree into what you can pay for it. So you really have to understand valuation from a realistic standpoint. A lot of times we look at things subjectively, which is the worst way to look at anything for investment. We really want to find an objective value of what it will sell for in the buyer's eyes, not in our eyes, but what it really objectively will sell for. And some things are easy to comp and some things are real difficult to comp. The more mainstream type, common track house where there's a lot of availability and there's a lot of turnover tend to be easier to comp than, more difficult, maybe custom homes, things like that. And so ideally when you're starting, especially, you want to pick things that are easy to comp. So you make sure that when you make the acquisition that you can rely on the value that you've established for the resale. And so there's a variety of things that influence that too. But I think that's probably the most critical thing that, people underestimate or exaggerate, or, they get, connected to the house some way, or they see a value that nobody else sees. But when you're doing this for a business, it really has to be objective. So I think that's the number one thing. The other thing is that you got to have your capital arranged. And, a lot of times, especially when you're starting, you end up paying a premium price for capital. So, for example, in today's marketplace, an investor can pay anywhere from probably on a low, maybe 7 or 8%, as high as maybe 12%. And those numbers are pretty much almost universal, regardless of the time and interest rate. So for example, normal interest rates these days through Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, are 3% or below 3, or wherever they're hovering now. In the investment market, they tend to be higher just based on risk. And so there's more, premium obviously associated with risk. There's fewer people that make these loans, and so you got to pay a premium. So you really have to factor that in as well. And that, the cost of, so the cost of capital, and then the overall cost to make the rehab. A lot of times we underestimate the cost to truly do the rehab. We tend to underestimate what the actual expenses will be. Oh, we can do that cheaper, we can do this cheaper, we can cut a corner over there. But the real cost to do rehabs is going up, it seems like hourly, with wages increasing, material costs going up. A lot of these costs, in fact, all the costs, I'd say, to rehab a house have gone up fairly substantially over the last 5-10 years. And so you have to be very realistic with what the cost will be. The cost of your capital and time. Usually if you're paying, if you get to a level where you're paying in cash, where you've developed your own net worth to subsidize your own acquisitions, et cetera, where you're not relying on capital, it gives you a little, it's a little easier that way because it doesn't cost you not to factor it. But factor the time of the rehab, the time for the resale, and the cost of the money. I think those are kinds of things that people underestimate in reality. They come to bite them. So for example, we think we can do something faster, we think we can do something cheaper. And usually where people fall into pitfalls is in one of these 3 areas. They overpaid for the property, they underestimated the scope of the rehab from a cost perspective or significance perspective, and then the time. They've underestimated the time it's going to take them to do that, which ends up costing them more money. And so those are the 3 things to really watch out for, I think, that will make the difference in especially as you start. As you get more seasoned with this stuff, you start to know things, and even when you're seasoned, you'll find pitfalls, for example. So for example, you don't look underground and you don't see where the condition of the sewer line or the water lines. You may overlook the attic, or maybe there's asbestos in the house or some element that you didn't visibly observe at the time you made your observation to purchase that appears later that costs money. And so those are the kinds of things you want to look for.
So what should the financial state of an investor be, or should they need to have do they need to have a lot of capital?
Well, if you have cash, that's the easiest way to do it. But obviously, when we're all starting, most of us don't have that luxury of having the capital to start. And so we have to kind of, poor boys, so to speak. And so the good news is today is flipping is, it's very prominent in the industry. And so people are aware of it. Let's assume you have no money. There's ways to start when you have no money. You can find guys like me who have a few bucks that may be interested in partnering. So that's one way to do it. It's very, when there's a deal present that has, a spread on it, that's a legitimate spread where there's an opportunity to make money, it's easier to find people that have the resources to do those things today because of, the prevalence of flipping in general. It's more prominent in the marketplace. And so that'd be square one. If you have no money, find somebody who you can partner with that has the money that you can pursue the transaction. If you have some money, then maybe you can skip a guy like me because I'm a little greedy and I probably want at least half the profits and all the other good things, and you probably have to do all the work. And so but that's okay if you're starting and whatever it is it gives you the opportunity to enter. And then the next step would be obviously to find some capital markets, so you can find some lenders who are willing to lend percentage of the acquisition, and even fund in some cases the rehab expenses. And so, like I said earlier, they'll usually charge a premium. It's not free money. It usually costs a little more, but it's something you can factor into your pro forma. So, for example, your estimation of time, then your rehab costs, your acquisition costs, what profit margin you want to make, and obviously, as you borrow more, you need to hedge more. In other words, your spread has to be higher. So, for example, you have to buy it at a lower price relative to a person like myself who's more established, who has the capital to come in, and our cost of funds is a lot lower. So we can make more mistakes in the different variables and still come out okay because the cost of funds is lower, for example. So Step one, find somebody you can partner with, assuming you have no cash. Step two, if you have some cash, maybe find a lending source that is reliable, that's competitive, that you can make a few bucks with. And the most important part of it all, I guess, goes back to just being realistic. You got to be realistic with those spreads, because that's where nearly everybody gets burned. Okay, so what I was saying is that, a lot of times it's good to find a good partner anyway when you're starting, because hopefully they've had the experience that's required to estimate the values properly and all the other elements properly. So it's kind of somebody you can rely on from the expertise. And maybe you're going to give up a little profit, but you may not get hurt either. And so the objective is to make money always. And so it's better not to make money than lose money, obviously. And so we had a run in our companies and affiliated companies where we did over 1,000 units with not a single loss on any. Now, which is, it's remarkable. We had a huge tailwind. I mean, we've had the greatest tailwind in the world with respect to the market, because, in the last 5-7 years, it's almost only gone up. And so interest rates have been favorable, buying activity has been favorable. And in the markets we've engaged in, which was primarily Southern California market, things appreciated. They appreciated, fairly rapidly and steadily over the last 5-7 years. And so it's been an opportunity probably not to make a lot of mistakes. For today's people, I think it's a different set of circumstances. Interest rates are very low. There's a lot of buying, but we've been, going through this market for 5, 7, 10 years. We've got some economic challenges with respect to employment. And so there are some elements that could present themselves that could, change the market, so to speak, and make it not so appealing. I don't think there's any, catalyst like we saw last time with the subprime and Alt-A type collapse. I don't think that this market will fall apart like that, but it could slowly slow. And if it does slowly slow, have you done everything properly? Have you bought it properly? Have you estimated the rehab properly? Have you, are you getting it done timely? Those are the things that bite you. And so when you check off yes, the likelihood and propensity to make money is much higher. When it's no, and then you couple a, turning marketplace where it's harder to sell things and things have to be more appealing, you got to consider that. So those are all just the things to look out for.
How do you gauge, like, if it's a good time, or when you say, oh, I'm projecting in the next, there may be a turn? Is it just the market? If you're looking at just how real estate is going?
Sure. Well, so what we want to do is it goes back to those 3 essential things. You got to buy it right, and you got to anticipate. Right now, we've had a huge tailwind with interest rates. Low interest rates have propelled this market into an area that we just didn't foresee 3 years ago. Mortgage companies are flourishing, not only the refinance business, but with huge amounts of purchase activity. Builders are, setting records. So those are all great things. But we all know, anybody with experience at least knows that nothing could last forever. There's things that change. And then, we're in the Las Vegas market, and so we have an unusual set of circumstance here with unemployment. We have a lot of gaming-centric type related jobs, and they're not going back to work so fast. We have, the convention center is slow, the influx of people is slowed, the money spend is down, and so that's a variable regionally that could impact our real estate market considerably, despite low interest rates. And then you got to consider low interest rates probably won't be here forever. That's a variable that will change. It's real hard to market time, but what you got to pay attention to is, things like we just talked about: employment, interest rate environments, the overall trend. You get a good vibe of what's happening in the marketplace. You need to see, days on the market, so to speak. So you need to analyze what's happening in the real estate market in terms of time, the price points that people are actively buying in. And then, so what you want to do, you have one hedge to all these things always, and that's your acquisition price. So you can always pay less to hedge that. So let's say you make a mistake. Let's say you make a mistake on what the cost of rehab was. If you bought it right, you got a kind of an insurance policy. You have that hedge because you have that big spread. And maybe at the end the spread has reduced, but it didn't, it didn't fully close. And so the idea is you have to manage all these variables. And sometimes it's hard to really understand what's going to happen economically. We have an election coming up, and there could be a change in power here. And so that could be a catalyst for some kind of whatever. And so you need to be conservative. At least from my perspective, I'd rather be one step behind and make $1 less, but not lose any that we made. And that's always the prerogative of the company, is to make sure that we make money, don't lose money. And sometimes we don't make as much as some of, our colleagues in the business, but generally when things change, we don't lose as much. And so, or lose for that matter. And that's ultimately the idea, is to make it and, and hedge it, so be a little more conservative, especially in a time now, because there is some volatility, even though it looks like everything is going fast forward. Interest rates at 3%, affordability very high, et cetera, et cetera. Builders booming. When you look at it all, it all looks like the greatest thing in the world, but there's always, variables that are underlying that may impact, tomorrow and the next year. And when you buy a property, you don't get to resell it tomorrow morning. There's a time, right? You got to close it, you got to rehab it, you got to market it, and all of a sudden, that time, all the variables that you anticipated initially are different now because the landscape has changed. And so you have to factor some of those variables into what you're doing to protect yourself. Because, the great thing about flipping, there's a lot of money to be made. On the, flip side, there's a lot of money to be lost. And what I'm saying, in certain markets, I'll give you an example. Let's say in the LA area, the metropolitan LA area, in those basins down there, and those surrounding counties, our average cost for an entry-level house could be $450 to $550. Well, if it goes down 10%, we've lost a lot of money. If we are in Las Vegas and it's maybe a little lower, where it's $350, in that range, obviously the opportunity to lose money could be a little less, but it still becomes a significant amount of money if you're off. And so the idea is not to be off. And those are, to the best of your ability, because you can't control the economy. You can't control who's in office. You can't control anything.
I know that you have partnered with your dad, Clement Ziroli, and Pac W. Dong in 1991, and you work together in the mortgage industry. Are they also your partners in Diamond Creek Holdings or any other businesses that you own?
Yeah, they're not actually active with me in Diamond Creek Holdings, but those two people were my mentors. Clement Ziroli Sr. was in the mortgage industry. He started flipping houses in the 50s and land when he first started in the business. And then Pac W. Dong was our CFO at First Mortgage Corporation, and a top quality person. And these guys are more conservative than me. I'm more one of the loose stallions that wants to run and do my thing. But these guys kind of, harbored me and made me realize these elements that exist. And it's okay to make money. You don't have to make too much money as long as you don't lose it. And so they're a little older than me. They have, several more stripes on their shirts than I have. And so they mentored me, essentially. They were my mentors in this business and in other businesses. And so it's good to have people like that. Don't be afraid to talk to resources that even are outside the business that you're doing things in, because you'll kind of find out that most of the theories in business are almost universal in the way you approach growth or, doing things, essentially. I mean, I don't think they're highly different in any one industry. I think they're very similar. A lot of the traits are the same. A lot of the techniques and skill sets are universally applied. Talk to people. Bounce things off of people. Don't think that people outside of what you're trying to do can't help you, because many times they see things that you don't see. I'll give you a good example of this. My father always had a philosophy: don't buy homes adjacent to railroad tracks.
Oh, yeah.
And then when the alluring great deal pops up, substantially below market value, and all the numbers pencil out and all these things, and we get suckered into it, and then all of a sudden it sits and sits and sits. Houses next to railroad tracks sell. There's people on them, but they're harder to sell. And so, as deals become sparse, you start to, you change your perspectives, and you want to take anything and everything you get your hands on because they're hard to find. Anybody entering this business will discover very quickly that they're just not abundant. They're not falling off the trees. I mean, they can be found, but they're hard. They take work to find. And so the low-hanging fruit, the easy deals to find, be cautious, because there's reasons. There's guys like me that have experience, and even a lot more experience than I have, that have passed on those deals. And there's usually reasons behind that. That's why it's an objective third party to bring into the equation probably would help you in some case, and listen to them. You know, a lot of times we get distracted, you know, by our own intuition or whatever, and we fail to listen to the people that, even though they may not have the high level of expertise that you would think they need, see things that you don't see, and you have to be, you know, wary of those types of things. So it's a good idea. You know, 4 eyes are better than 2, et cetera, and it just goes on.
I would like to thank Clem for taking time out of his busy schedule and coming on the show and sharing his expertise. Be sure to post any questions or comments below. Let us know if there's a topic you'd like to have discussed on the show. Comment below or email educatingyourmoney@gmail.com. Clem, if any of our followers wanted to get a hold of you or had specific questions or even wanted to look more into what you're doing now, how can they reach out to you?
I'll give you my cell phone number. It's 951-712-8389. I like to help. If I can help you in any way, grow what you're trying to do, or be that third party to help you try to analyze what you're doing. I may be a partner in some cases. I may be a lender in other cases. I may be somebody to talk to. I mean, I don't mind helping anybody at any time that's trying to do well and make some money. It's what I like to do. And so I'm always open for that.
And any websites?
Our website at Diamond Creek Holdings is www.thecreekcompanies.com. And you're welcome to check that out again and browse around. And if I can help you, reach out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for watching Educate Your Money podcast, where it's not just about making money, but about educating money. See you next time for the next episode. Thank you, Clem.
Thank you very much.